The existence of Zack Snyder's unfiltered epic vision of Justice League was only made possible due to the fans, and Snyder bows down to them. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. As a tireless campaign spread through social media like a plague, DCU fans hounded Warner Bros. For years before the studio finally conceded to fan demand. The resulting Snyder's Cut, with an extended 4-hour-long vision of the director's ambitious story, made the fans resent WB even more for rejecting his planned 5-movie arc for Justice League. However, the director knows when not to push his luck in the ever-changing game of Hollywood musical chairs, although Snyder gives credit where it is due. The DC Extended Universe has had its fair share of problems. But the most objectionable of them was Zack Snyder's third film, Justice League, which went through hell and back to reach the audience in its purest, uncensored form. As difficult as it may have been for Snyder and the studio to find common ground, it would not have been possible without the DCU fans. The little details that stood out in the theatrical cut of the film sent a wave of dissent and anger throughout the world as fans took to social media to launch a movement titled #ReleaseTheSnyderCut. The campaign became so powerful over the years that it led to the now infamous WB shakedown in 2021 in a historic win for movie fans. Making a 100-year-old studio bow down to fan demand is not a meager achievement. The collective love for the DC Extended Universe was such that it made the fans absolutely livid to think about missing out on Zack Snyder's raw vision for his movie universe after he left the Justice League production due to a family tragedy. Meanwhile, Warner Bros. Quickly arranged for a replacement who oversaw the post-production and editing of the film, although most of it was already done by Snyder before his exit. But Joss Whedon's PG-washed cut of the film was an atrocity that did not deserve a place in the grim-dark reality of the DCU, and the studio should have foreseen the drastic difference in Whedon's and Snyder's filmmaking styles. Although not an entirely suitable method of handling rejection, the DCU fans did everything in their power to stand up to studio censorship and the oppression of creativity. The fans and their online social media campaign turned Zack Snyder's Justice League into a reality, and despite not having the final 2 movies of the director's envisioned saga, the DCU is a little better for having the director's cut in the bag. In 2023, Rolling Stones uncovered a Warner Media report that revealed that the online fan campaign was bolstered by fake bot accounts that later turned dangerous, insofar as to send death threats to studio executives if they failed to greenlight the Snyder's Cut and restore his film universe. However, in Snyder's eyes, the existence of the bot accounts told a different story altogether. In a 2023 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, when asked about the toxic campaign of the Snyderverse Legion and the eventual cyber harassment and threats made against Warner Bros. Personnel, the director claimed, "The truth is, it doesn't matter. The movie got made. If they were smart enough to employ bots in this thing, then they won. That movie has no business existing, and it does. I'm not going to comment on the details of whether they are good or bad, whether they are toxic or bullying. That's in every chat room. It's what comes with the internet. But I do know that the work they did on some level was good. I can say for a fact that they did good. That is undeniable." The overwhelming fan pressure from the campaign and the volatile in-house climate at Warner Bros. Was documented in Sean O'Connell's book, Release the Snyder Cut, the crazy true story behind the fight that saved Zack Snyder's Justice League. The fan-led fight is still regarded as one of the biggest movements that has ever swept over social media. However, when it comes to the fan movement that turned toxic in Snyder's favor, the director has little to say, let alone criticize his fans for standing up in his favor and saving his film from studio politics. Despite criticism aimed at Zack Snyder, the film's director, it turns out he wasn't the one behind the changes to the original story in the adaptation. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. In the world of film and TV, most people tend to think of the director as the one in charge of everything. While they play a huge role, it's super important to remember that the screenwriter is also a key player in creating the project. Sometimes, the same person fills both roles, but often the director is just the director, and the writer is someone else entirely. Zack Snyder was seen as a visionary from the beginning, but when Watchmen was released, that perception kind of changed. The movie didn't resonate with the general audience, and many laid the blame on the director. However, it turns out that Snyder wasn't responsible for the issues with the production at all. He merely directed the filming and had no role in developing the plot. Famous for his director's cuts and regarded as a visionary genius by many, it's fair to say that not all of Zack Snyder's productions have lived up to that reputation. David Craig and Brian Crano talk I don't understand. Summary: Zack Snyder faced harsh criticism for years over changes made in the Watchmen movie adaptation compared to the comics. However, screenwriter David Hayter revealed that Snyder wasn't responsible for those changes. They came from a friend of director Darren Aronofsky. Also, Alan Moore, the creator of the comic story, didn't bother watching the film and openly stated he's against adaptations. AD. In the world of film and TV, most people tend to think of the director as the one in charge of everything. While they play a huge role, it's super important to remember that the screenwriter is also a key player in creating the project. Sometimes, the same person fills both roles, but often the director is just the director, and the writer is someone else entirely. Still from Watchmen, credits, Warner Brothers Pictures. Still from Watchmen, credits, Warner Brothers Pictures. Zack Snyder was seen as a visionary from the beginning, but when Watchmen was released, that perception kind of changed. The movie didn't resonate with the general audience, and many laid the blame on the director. However, it turns out that Snyder wasn't responsible for the issues with the production at all. He merely directed the filming and had no role in developing the plot. Zack Snyder did not write the script for Watchmen. Zack Snyder interviewed by Netflix, credits, Netflix. Zack Snyder interviewed by Netflix, credits, Netflix. Famous for his director's cuts and regarded as a visionary genius by many, it's fair to say that not all of Zack Snyder's productions have lived up to that reputation. AD. With that in mind, it's accurate to say that Snyder doesn't seem to be the same professional he once was, but it's unfair to blame him for the failure of Watchmen. The film did receive a low score on Rotten Tomatoes, but that wasn't due to the director, and very few people are aware of this. The DC superhero movie was released in 2009, and to this day, if it's remembered at all, it's mainly seen as a flop within this cinematic universe. The plot is quite complex, largely because it incorporates real-life events. However, the film's biggest criticism was that it sacrificed the essence of the story for the sake of aesthetic enhancement. The comic book story was a huge success, which led to it being considered for a film adaptation. However, in the movie, the essence was lost because the segment known as Tales of the Black Freighter was removed, along with a change to the original ending, which served as the crucial link to all of Ozymandias's actions. However, important events occurred before Snyder was hired that influenced the very details that many fans disliked. In an interview with the Script Apart podcast, screenwriter David Hayter revealed that the changes fans complained about weren't actually Snyder's idea, but rather came from a friend of filmmaker Darren Aronofsky. He also mentioned that adapting the story's ending would be very challenging, especially after September 11th, as he didn't believe it would be appropriate to depict images of dead bodies in Times Square. Aronofsky was initially set to direct the film but had to turn it down to complete another project. However, after learning about Hayter's idea, he shared it with a friend who was a professional physicist. The screenwriter said, Zack Snyder faced harsh criticism for years over changes made in the Watchmen movie adaptation compared to the comics. However, screenwriter David Hayter revealed that Snyder wasn't responsible for those changes.